Welcome back to another virtual tasting with Vinny's Beverage Depot. Pat, Joe, and Brett from the Whiskey Hotline, as usual. Sorry, you got to keep talking to us. Joined with us today are Jose and Sofia from Tequila Partida. Sofia, this may or may not be named after your family, I'm guessing?
That would be, yes, it is.
Okay, and Jose, you are the master distiller, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So you want to give us a little background about how long you guys have been making tequila there and any kind of specifics that you think kind of people should know about when it comes to Partida's tequilas?
Jose, would you like to take the floor on that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, Partida, we started back in 2005, and we have been producing with the same formula and the same recipe since the beginning. And it's pretty, we are very consistent in the way we produce the tequila, which is basically respect the agave when reach maturity, and then cook slowly in a stainless steel autoclave, and so we can control the pressure and temperature for a longer period of time. And then we ferment it in a open fermentation stainless steel tanks as well, and the distillation happen in the old school pot steel, stainless steel and copper, and the aging in white American oak. That's basically the same let's say recipe we have followed since the beginning. And our goal has been to have consistency and to be to high quality, choosing the best agave only from the region of Tequila Valley. We are located in the heart of the Tequila Valley, in the Tequila town. So we started there, and we have been producing Blanco, only tequila, 100% agave, small batches, and 100% additive freeze, meaning no coloring, flavoring, or sweetener, anything that affect or benefit in artificially the flavor. So that's the core values that we have been followed since day one. And we have been doing that for 15 years, from 2005 until 2020, this year. And this year we are launching a new line of tequila, which is the Roble Fino, the one that we're gonna be.
That's really
So
cool.
you talked
The no additive thing. I was just going to say real quick. We're big fans of that, and that's something. Are you going to jump on board that certification that's coming up with the additive free stuff?
Yes, thank you for asking. But actually, we are in the middle of the certification from the company Tequila Matchmaker. Gruber and Scarlett visit our distillery 2 weeks ago, and we certify already the Blanco, and they need to come back when we are doing barreling, open barreling, and bottling of Reposado, Añejo, and Extra Añejo, so we can get the full certification. But yes, that's the we are in the same line of that.
So you mentioned the agave and the history, and I think that's a big part of the name for people, and people who follow tequila know that the name Partida in tequila is sort of like the name Gallo in wine in the United States. There is a history in the business, especially with agave farming, that goes back generations, right, Sofia?
Exactly.
So your family has been doing this for multiple generations.
That's correct. And, that's really the tribute of our brand really goes to my tío Enrique, my father's brother, who was my late Enrique. He passed away in 2015, but it's really a nod to his legacy. And he really believed as a farmer that the care that he gave to his agave to allow it to mature fully, to harvest it with precision, would reflect as mastery in the glass. And that is what our philosophy as well. That's what we live by. So he really was the inspiration behind our brand. And yes, the Partida family is definitely, tequileros, true and true in the state of Jalisco. And we're just very proud to bring this beautiful juice to you.
You guys have both mentioned agave maturity now. How long is it taking to get an agave to maturity where you're located?
Well, basically, that answer is the time has changed. I would say when we
Okay.
started back in 2005, we only accept agaves of 8 to 9 years, no?
It's quite
Minimum.
old.
So yeah, quite old. But those time it was available agave that reached maturity in those years, no?
Mhm.
Nowadays, I would say in the last 4 or 5 years, it's more common to see agaves, and I think it's more standardized, the cultivation of agave that reach maturity in 6 years. I would say normally 6, no longer than 6.
Mhm.
It is rare if you find an agave of 7 years nowadays. And I think the trend is to shorter the time even more to 5 years. So all the plants, the CRT, the Chamber of Tequileros, the Union of Agave, all the planation, all the schedule is based now in 5 years. I don't I mean it's I think many things has changed, but I think the knowledge as well in cultivation, the technology and the techniques have improved, and you can see very good agaves in 5 years that normally used to take 8, 9, 10 years. Many people mention is that domestication as well, no, of the plant, that it's more like a massive production.
Mhm.
So, and you're still in the Partida family is still growing the agave, correct? You're still
That's-
farming the agave?
That's correct. Yeah, we are still farming the agave, and the agave is, basically selling to, different distilleries.
Mhm.
And I know that at Partida we have partnerships with growers as well as my family that, Jose has very strict specifications. So he's looking for, particular maturity, particular brick level, carbohydrates, all of that. So he
And
definitely.
you're able to, and then how much, I know what you talked about, accelerating part of the acceleration of the agave is changing the way that they're reproducing, and how much are you able to allow, are you able to allow on the agriculture side, like a quiote, to bring in some natural reproduction versus just, any kind of pollinated reproduction, or is it really now strictly just, the
The
cuttings
nursery
dropping,
grown
the
monoculture
nursery
type
grown,
of thing.
Well,
Yeah.
there is a couple of effort in the industry that are in order to avoid this domestication and to have the more vulnerable the plant because of this reproduction, massive
Mhm.
reproduction. There is a couple of project with universities in Mexico and science about the natural reproduction with pollination with either bees or bats. No, there is a huge movement that is led by David Suro and the guy from Philadelphia and Siembra Valles brand.
Yeah. David's a good friend.
Okay, so David is doing a lot of good efforts with not only with the distilleries, because sometimes the distilleries they don't own the agave. I think with the agaveros, no. And the thing is that nowadays agave is rocket sky in price. Is almost reaching 30 pesos. And when we started Partida 15 years ago, it was 1 peso. So 30 times.
Wow.
Incredible.
Even less than 1 peso. And we see a shortage in the last couple of years, and maybe it's going to last 1 or 2 years more. But then it's going to be the opposite. Again, it's going to be a more offer, a sobre oferta, no? So we see it's going to drop the prices again. So it's not easy to reach this let's say balance between producers, agaves, and try to do it with the natural way, because the natural reproduction, you are going to lose plants, right? Because the quiote is going to produce the flower and it's going to produce the seeds. So that kills some plants, and every plant nowadays is 30 kilos times 30 pesos is 1,000 pesos is I don't know, $50, no, one plant. So Partida is what we do is, okay, we want premium agave. We have our Partida family agaves, but it's not the only source, because sometimes we find better source in the valley. And nowadays it's even harder to have this policy of Partida, what we call single single malt tequila, no, which is produce agave from the same distillery, produce with and bottle and age in the same distillery, meaning we don't bring agaves from other regions, we don't bring liquid bulk tequila from other distilleries, and we don't bottle in other facilities. So everything is in one distillery that represent the terroir or of the region of the Tequila Valley. No, answering your question is we are putting our part with these efforts. We have been supporting David Sugro and BAT program and all that. However, we don't have all the tools to implement and use the agave that it's let's say natural reproduction. No, it's now with only with the hijuelos.
But if you develop to the point that enough plantings arise, eventually you would think that you're going to be able to, at some point in time, the hope is that you can afford to do that in a couple of years if there is not a surplus, but an increasing amount of raw material available.
Sure.
Right, that in a couple of years, you would hope that you might be able to then start to extend the lifespan a little bit of
Sure.
how long they stay in the field.
Sure. Actually, in 2023, I think the price is going to drop and it's going to be more available agaves with this characteristic, no? And more agave producers and distilleries are willing to make this practice to make it sustainable, no? Nowadays, it's very hard, quite honest, because all the craft and small distilleries and more small brands, we are suffering a lot, no, because of the price of the agave, and trying not to sacrifice the quality of the tequila, meaning the agave. So we are trying to source the best agave, the entresaque, no, selecting instead of all the agave in agave fields, we select the best one, but that is has a price, has a premium that has to be paid.
Sure.
Jose, is part of the problem that, some of these companies now that are mass producing tequila using these methods like the diffuser method, for instance, that are taking the agaves so young because these methods are so quick and so cost effective. And so the distilleries like ours, who are more handcrafted and smaller, are suffering because the big guys are taking all the agaves so young.
I don't think the reason is the diffuser and producer. I think they have their market, and there's market for everyone. And I think it's okay what they do because it's allowed by law, and people is willing to pay that prices, right?
Yes.
Obviously, there are mass production, but I think the main problem is the bad communication between the agave farmers and the producer as well as the distributor. So we need to work together as an industry and the industry have been doing a lot of improvement in this sense. No, the CRT has put inventories by satellite. No, so they have all the inventories of the agave, and they put strict norms to register the agave and so on. But there are other factors such as losses of agave due to disease or plagues. 20% used to be 5%, but it's the same thing that we reproduce the plant over and over again, and it's like a photocopy. No, every photocopy is different. So you see, and it's more weak. Let's say that the agave plant, so it's more
susceptible.
It's more susceptible that a plague like picudo, no, the small insect that is called picudo, or the AIDS disease that killed the plant. It's increasing to 20% the projection.
That's high.
So this and also the fact that we don't the production of the honeys, the nectars, no, more and more nectar, no, agave nectar. So it's gaining agave because this agave, they can use any agave, but the blue agave is the one that has more ART or sugar content, as well as the flavor. In the agave nectar, the best flavor, quite honest, is the blue agave. So that's why the big companies are producing agave nectar here in this region in Jalisco. And I think that the solution is just to get along and put together the top leaders of the agave producer. There are maybe 20, no, that produce 80% of the agave in Mexico for the industry, and then put the 10 distilleries that produce more liquid, and then work along together. No, so I think there's some, but it's complicated because big groups from foreign groups are now different interested, no, in different industries.
We'll be more controversial than you, because I think that the whole use of diffuser using young agave, which is immature. Look, you don't have to. We were earlier talking about flavor. Bottom line, guess what? You don't have to dump vanilla extract. You don't have to dump aspartame. You don't have to dump agave nectar or sugar. You don't have to dump any of that crap in. If any of that crap in your tequila, if you would just wait 2 more years until you actually have a mature plant and get rid of diffuser technology, which is introducing horrible chemicals to the plant. It's legal because it behooves the producers who are trying to turn out a lot of volume to make it legal. So we would, and again, and that's the compliment to Partida, because you do none of that. You make tequila with the correct plants in the correct way, and you make wonderful, wonderful product. See, they won't, if the CRT won't come to Chicago and go after us, so I can say that.
No, absolutely not.
We're safe. Insulated from their criticism.
You're safe. Excellent.
Well, so let's talk about Roble Fino.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Which one should we start with here? I mean, you want to give us a background of the line here, kind of inspiration behind it. I think there's some obvious ties to some Edrington partnership, right?
Absolutely. This is Jose's baby, so I'm going to let him take the lead on this.
Sure. Roble Fino means fine oak, because we believe it's a very fine barrel used from Edrington, because we partnership with Edrington 3 years ago. And this partnership consists in distribution in the US, and they own a participation of Partida. And we, after this partnership, we were very lucky to have access to the barrels, the cask, the very desirable cask of the group Edrington. And in one trip 2 years ago in Scotland, I was able to visit one of the finest Scotch single malt distilleries, and meeting not only the distilleries, but the people who make the whiskey, like Gordon Motion, or the whiskey maker of Macallan, and Highland Park, and Glen Rothes. And after this discussion and Scotch whiskeys drinking and tequila, because we did a tasting, we realized that we might experiment and do something with tequilas. And we said, okay, Scotch barrels in tequila, finishing with the Scotch barrels that previously was used with sherry. So that was the first idea. We received a very small quantity of barrels, and we started experimenting, putting tequila blanco, reposado, and añejo. And we discovered that one thing that I learned, and we learned, all the team at the distillery, that the tequila blanco didn't go very well with the sherry oak, and ex-sherry and ex-whiskey. But the reposado and añejo, very good actually, but different timing. We noticed that the reposado, because our reposado has 6 months of aging in white American ex-bourbon, and this is a European oak used with sherry and Scotch. So it's a different, and it's a 250 liters, it's a Hofhead, they call Hofhead. And we put the reposado, and we noticed that our level of color in reposado is roughly 20%, where the blanco is 0%, and where the añejo, the extra añejo is 60%. So we have more space in the reposado to gain color and flavor. So we noticed that in a very short period of time, 2 months, the reposado balanced perfectly. the agave, which is the tequila, plus the whiskey, no, which is corn and rye and barley, no, and the maple, vanilla, all the flavors that come from the bourbon, plus the sherry, which is raisins and as well as Scotch whiskey.
Yeah.
But the sherry, I think, is the element that is super strong, even though it's been used with the single malt whiskey for at least 24 years, because by law single malt has to age 12 years. They use it twice, so it's 24 years plus 3 years in sherry. Is around 27 years all these barrels, and still the sherry is very present. So having said that, the reposado, we noticed that with 2 months finishing our reposado with those casks, it was amazing balance between all the elements. No,
So the standard Partida Reposado is 6 months in American white oak, and this is the same. It still spends 6 months, and then it finishes for 2 more in the European sherry oak.
correct.
Okay. Well, should we start with the Reposado then?
Yes.
Good. I'm thirsty.
And Jose actually increased the ABV on the Reposado to 43.
Okay.
Nice. Roy's a big fan, and I'm sure that made some friends in the bartending world, because that
Totally.
typically gets as a request you get from bartenders.
Exactly.
One of the things that we learn in Scotland is about the ABV, no, and that is correct. The more intense the timing in oak, because in whiskey it's all about oak, no, because I tried the new make, which is the Blanco, but it's just grain alcohol, no.
Yeah.
I think is the cask that they select, and the whiskey maker and the master of woods. So the more intense, let's say the cask and the characteristic of the aging, the more the alcohol by volume. I think it's a direct relationship. That's why our Reposado core line is 40%. And because we have these 2 more months that is very intense, we need a higher alcohol. And we try it, prove and error, no? Putting tequila at 45 and then at 47, 48, even 50. Because people in Scotland believe that it's 50 or a straight barrel. In tequila, it's a little different, no? Because it's very strong. My personal opinion is that it's very strong to try tequilas higher than 50%, 100 proof.
Yikes.
Well, you wouldn't come off the still much higher than, I mean, your average, when you make a distillation run, your average off the still isn't much over 50, is it?
Yeah, I mean, at the second distillation, we go to 44, 45, no? And that's the ABV we put in the barrels to extract and to absorb more coloring and flavor. But then we need to put the desmineralized water to reduce the intensity, because it's very hard. It's sweet, it's dangerous, because if you try it, it's smooth and it's nice. But one thing that I also learned in Scotland is that if you put some drops of water, open the tequila, open the whiskey, or open the spirit, no? So using volcanic water that we have the well inside the distillery, it's the perfect opening of the flavor for the.
Okay. So you're filling typical Partida at 47, roughly. Where would you say you're filling barrels for the base spirit? You're filling the barrels at 47%.
No, 55. At the
55.
same.
Okay.
Yes, at the same ABV that it's in the second distillation.
Got it. Okay.
And this is a good
That's pretty
question,
standard.
because some of the distilleries reduce the alcohol. I remember when I was studying a course in expert in production processing in the Universidad Autónoma de Guadalajara. There are some distilleries and some master distillers that believe that it's better to reduce water in the aging, so the tequila cannot suffer drastic change after the aging. We believe that the higher the alcohol, we abstract more coloring.
More extraction.
More abstraction.
That's a battle, and that's a battle that is fought to this day in Kentucky. For instance, the legal maximum, you can fill a barrel at 62.5%, but people fill as low as 107 proof. So what, 53.5. People will go that low. And again, the argument, do you let the water age with the alcohol, or do you let the alcohol age and then
add the
cut it
water it
down?
down.
Yeah.
Because then you have the differences is you have to be extremely careful. It probably doesn't happen with agave as much as it does with grape spirit, but you have to be careful. It takes a long time to cut to proof before you bottle. You can't just take a vat of tequila and dump a bunch of water in it and say, okay, we're done. You actually have to introduce, at least in brandy for sure, and whiskey definitely, you have to add that very slowly and let it sit and marry for a period of time before you're ready for bottle.
We actually do that. When we are about to bottle, we dilute the tequila to the desirable alcohol by volume, which is 80 proof. And then we let it rest. And we have actually, we develop an especially tank where we put bubbles, no? Very, very fine, small bubbles. And
Sure.
it's the oxygenation, no?
Yep.
This is notably rounder and richer than the standard Partida Reposado, which I love the standard Partida Reposado, and I think it's it shows a lot of layers of complexity, even though it's kind of like lighter on its feet. One of the all-time spirit reviews, I guess, that I always remember when I first started in the business. I was reading an issue of Paul Packelt's Spirit Journal where he describes Partida Reposado as the Bentley of Reposado tequilas. And that's stuck with me for like 15 years. It's just one of those goofy things in a spirit review that I always remember. Whenever I'm talking about it, and I teach our tequila classes internally, you know, I always kind of bring that up, is that's a review that's stuck in my head. And this is like, you can tell it's Partida, but it's notably different. Like tasting this blind, I would think that maybe this was a Highland grown agave tequila. It's just so much richer and more honeyed than I think I normally associate with Partida.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Because normally the tequila Partida Valley, it's more dry, no? It's more mineral, it's more, I would say, grapefruit and vanilla, no? But it's very plain. Because it's these levels. A good exercise is to try one and one, because this is the base for this. And you're gonna, if you go back to this, you're gonna say, no, this is very smooth. It's very no flavor. No, it's very flat. And the reason is because double aging actually accelerate the process of aging. Even if we leave this for a longer period of time, we will never get the aromas and flavor and complexity that we have here.
Yeah. For me, that raisin undertone, that sherry undertone is really prominent, especially in the Reposado, even more so to me than the Añejo, which has been aged longer than the Reposado. I pick up a lot of the sherry undertone in this.
Well, I think part of that is there's probably less of that kind of American oak character getting in the way of the sherry with the Reposado.
Right.
Like
yeah, and it's the spice is there, but it's different. It's just another layer. For me, it's a little bit not as much of this that sort of raisin fruit, which Jose said, that raisiny fruit, which would be a typical characteristic. It's that spice, and it's because I always want a little bit of that pepperiness. That's what I enjoy in tequila, amongst others. Is there's always that bright peppery to go along with citrus and herb and the sweetness that you get. So yeah, that's fantastic. Yet it's still not dominated. Always the issue that you have when you put a spirit as delicate as tequila in wood is it going to be dominated by the wood? Because tequila off the still can be very delicate and elegant.
Yeah, and I think you see that a lot with Añejo tequilas, as they just get so wood driven even after only 12, 14 months. And for this to have, a double barrel treatment essentially,
yes,
and to be 8 months old for a Reposado, I think it's nuanced. It kept some of that fresh citrus character to it. I really like it. It's very, really nice.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's textured perfectly. I like that sherry. The sherry oak kind of shines a little bit more on the finish and frames a little bit more, but doesn't steal the show on the nose.
Yeah.
You still get all the beautiful agave notes up front. They don't get overworked.
And that higher ABV, really so much movement in my mouth. It's just
That's
really
welcome.
intense.
We're all fans of cask strength whiskey, so I mean, I like seeing higher proof tequila. I know it's not it's not traditionally down there. It's what, 38% or something that gets bottled at usually. So it's not it's a cultural shift, I suppose. It's going to have to happen.
Right.
Yes.
More of those higher proof.
And there has been some response where you have like Don Fulano is a brand that his Enrique Fonseca makes actually in tequila, that has been coming, and they've been one of the first ones that typically had a high strength. And I think you're starting to see a little bit more movement towards that. But I think as a response to a lot of cases, as a response to bartenders, continually asking for higher proof, because if they get higher proof, they feel that the base alcohol will hold up better to ice and to mixers and to modifiers and things like that.
Yes.
But no, this is beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, should we try the Añejo next or Crystalino next? What order do you recommend, Jose?
I recommend the Añejo because the Crystalino is apart. I think it's apart.
Okay.
Should add, I like the new package too that you've got this bottle in. It's this fantastic bottle.
It is beautiful.
Nice heavy cork.
It's a definite Edrington influence.
Yes, it really, you can tell their influence, can't you? And next year, in fact, we'll have, the package will be the same shape, but it'll be a heavier crystal. So it'll be even more premium next year.
Wait till they all start coming in boxes too that are very elaborate.
It's funny, they're not even French. Normally we expect this to all come out of the French, not like not a British retirement fund.
It's a charity. It's Scotland's largest charitable trust. Isn't that incredible?
That's right. Yeah, not for profit indeed.
Yeah.
Okay,
So what I love about the Añejo is the color, that really beautiful red shimmering color that's coming through. I think is just lovely on the Partida Añejo.
Natural color too, right? Nothing added to this. Yeah.
Nothing added to the line of Partida, and nor the newest Roble Fino edition. And like we said, for the Añejo, the base was also the Añejo.
Okay.
So it was an Añejo, 18 months, with white American oak, medium toast, ex-bourbon, and we use, and then 5 months, the Roble Fino.
That's an old Añejo.
And the thing is that the more color we have, the abstraction and the capacity of abstraction is less, no? So we can abstract more with a white, with a blanco, rather than in a reposado and with Añejo and extra Añejo. So it takes a little longer, which is perfect to balance more aromas and flavors, no?
Now, it's interesting. So how many generations of this have you done? Because I'm interested because you now have the ability to reuse these barrels. So you get the barrels once and you're going to have the ability, they were used once for sherry, then they were used twice for likely either Macallan or Highland Park. And then you have them and you've used them once for tequila twice. And I'm sure that's part of your regimen. What are you experimenting with reusing the finishing barrels? And do you go through where maybe you use you do a 5-month finishing on Añejo for one of the barrels and then do that again? And then is that extracted enough to go back and make another run at putting Blanco in, fresh tequila?
Yes. It's a lot of information that we don't, in the industry of tequila, quite honest, nobody knows about that. You need to learn from for our own resources, because in whiskey, the angel share is 2% per year. In tequila is 10% per year, the first year.
Sure.
So the acceleration of aging is so fast in the tequila because of the weather. It's a semi-desert, obviously. So you don't have too much time to react. And the CRT are not happy neither, opening all the barrels every month. And that's the policy that we have in order to measure the color and to taste, and to see the difference and the evolution of every single barrel of that we're using for Roble Fino.
And some CRT cop has to supervise all that every time you open a barrel.
Yes, they need to. They need to authorize you as a distillery to break the seal, the paper seal that they put in the. No, depends on the person, because they change every month, and so the person trusting you, that is gonna say yes, cut it, and I'm gonna check in my way back from other distilleries just to put it the new one, but they have to put the new ones, right? And to make sure at the end they have the information and the volumes and everything and the analysis, no, the chromatographic analysis, so they can make sure that you keep the same liquid, right? But asking, I think it's a very interesting question about bread. I didn't know. I didn't that every barrel has his own story. No, I think
Sure.
this is true most in the Scotch whiskies that we are bringing from the Edrington group. Quite honest, in the bourbon industry, is more flat. No, it's more flat,
Yep.
the coloring. But now in the second, Sofia mentioned that we are working in the second edition of Roble Fino because the first one, it was limited edition and it's gone. All the bottles, I think we have a few for websites and it's already in some liquor stores, such as obviously Beanies. But it's gonna be gone by the end of this year. So we need to produce more, and we are bringing more barrels from Scotland and learning more. One thing that we learned already is that we don't want punchon of bot, which is 500 liters.
Really?
cask.
Right.
We want half heads. Why? Because that's the one that gives us the best profile. And then each barrel, we need to select and track this barrel, paint more color, and therefore there is a direct relationship between the color and the flavor as well.
So that's so interesting. What is the Mexican or CRT law regarding size? What is the largest barrel you're allowed to use that allows you to make an age claim like Reposado, Añejo, Extra Añejo?
Well, in
Is there-
Reposado, then Reposado is not, I think it's not no limit.
No.
But,
Really?
but in the Añejo, it's up to 600 liters. So
600 liters. Okay.
yes. And
So
extra,
that's, for audience, that's 100 liters less than Scotch. They can age up to 700 liters in a Scotch whiskey or an Irish whiskey.
But it's
And
typical. I think the standard barrel size that most distilleries are using for the añejo tequilas is 250 liters. Correct, Jose?
no, I think,
200.
yeah, I mean, in the industry, depend if you are a craft ultra premium tequila, yes, you're gonna use single barrels. Let's say 200 which is the typical barrels that we source from the U.S. No, from American
The
or
bourbon producers. Yeah.
yes, basically the bourbon or whiskey, American whiskey or Canadian whiskey barrels. No, but you can create your own barrels as well. No, and
Sure.
the law in Mexico is as long as it's oak, and encino is another type of oak, and either juice or new, toast or burn or both. So many people experiment with those. And we have experiment our Extra Añejo putting in a smaller barrels, the same barrels, changing to 100-liter barrels instead of 200.
Right.
So that accelerates in a natural way the aging process.
Yeah.
And it doesn't probably less liquid loss as well because again, it's reacting much more quickly. There's less room to lose liquid because you're going to use it a lot more quickly. It's interesting.
Yes.
But your downside effect, I would guess, is maybe that allows the wood to be too aggressive.
Yes, it
and
is.
would really overwhelm the actual spirit.
Correct. So what we normally do is, let's say 80% of the initial time is in big barrels. And then if we check and it's not enough, we can accelerate the final process with that smaller barrel.
This añejo, by the way, is just awesome. This is a whiskey drinker's tequila if I've ever tasted one.
Without a doubt, yeah.
And Jose at this ABV is now 45. So it's even more than the Reposado. So it's got that lot of movement happening in the mouth.
And the idea of high alcohol is not only, to be different and stronger. No, the idea is to balance. At the end of the day, I think my main goal in Tequila Partida is to produce tequilas balanced, no, in a natural way. So we have very complex aging. Imagine the story of American agave, blanco, very intense, no additives. Then we have the oak from American oak bourbon, used 3 years, no, with high the mash bill, high concentration of corn, at least 80%. So it's pretty sweet. And then we have the Spanish from Galicia, from the north of Spain, oak, and then sherry in the south of Spain, and then Scotland, single malt for a long period of time. So we have a lot of stories, cultures, and flavors that we want, obviously, to respect the natural color, the natural balance, and everything. And I think 45% was the one. At the end of the day, was I have a panel tasters at the distillery and the office in Guadalajara, and everyone agreed that's. I mean, I have the last word, but 45% is what most of the expert in our house said that is the best.
When you were in Scotland, did they try to make you talk in a Scottish accent?
No, it's. I think they speak something like garlic or.
Garlic.
Yeah, garlic.
Gaelic. Gaelic. Yeah. Actually, where you would have gone, they speak Gaelic, but in Highland Park, in that area, they actually have Scandinavian. There's actually a slight Norwegian influence.
Incredible.
And then there's a whole nother dialect, which is nobody that isn't from the northeast of Scotland can actually understand. But if you go to the northeast, like Aberdeenshire in that area, they speak a dialect called Doric, which is a mixture of like basically English, and it's very Germanic. And it's Scottish if they have rocks in their mouth. So it's impossible to understand.
Yeah, it took me a few days to figure it out myself too. I was like, what?
Right?
Yeah.
But it's pretty nice people, very very humble people, and very.
Well, the Scots are wonderful. Yeah,
it's wonderful, and they want to share their culture.
Yeah.
They actually recognize that the Irish people invented the whiskey, but they become more popular, in the world.
Yeah, they perfected it.
And now they recognize that the Japanese whiskey is amazing. Is perfect in quality.
Yeah, they're doing.
Well, they learned how to make
You're
it
right
in
about the
Scotland.
culture. You're right about it, but it's also another nice combination of the culture, because just like that, just the genuineness is, to me, has always been a part of Mexican culture as well.
Yeah.
Like the friendliness, the openness, the interest in everything. And I think that fits well with the way that the Scots sort of approach things.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Wow. So, okay.
So
Añejo, 18 months in American oak, 5 more months in the European oak, sherry, malt whiskey casks. Really big. It's oak driven, but it's not dry, which I really like about it. I wasn't prepared for, like, one of you mentioned earlier how the Reposado you thought had a little more of that kind of sherry influence character to it. And I was like, how could that possibly be? Really, I think it tastes more like a traditional extra añejo. There's that little undercurrent of kind of like spiced plum or something going on in there. But it's definitely, it's just beautiful. It's just so well balanced.
I have to say that expert in like Paul Paco, he loved the añejo, and people like Grover from Tequila Matchmaker, he loved the Reposado. He was the one that loved the Reposado. So it both has different profile. If you like more, I would say sherry and agave presence, I think the Reposado is the one that you like. It reminds you the Bentley of Reposado of Partida plus a refined sherry whiskey, but just as a tiny. And this one is more like you said, an extra añejo. It's more like if you like whiskey, Scotch whiskeys, which I believe Paul Paco is a huge whiskey drinker. That's why he loved the
Very good. All right, so let's talk about the Crystalino then, which is a Reposado Crystalino. Is that right?
Yes, Reposado Crystalino.
Crystalino is a category that is not officially yet. And the reason we developed this is because we have heard for many years in Mexico that the Crystalinos are bad, and we have tried it and we didn't like it. However, we said, okay, why don't we try it and we do it by ourselves? And we did it without, again, any additive and in a natural way to do it. And we said, okay, we did it with Añejo and Reposado to have the whole family, the 3 family, and we decided to do it with Reposado because it's less quantity of color. So it's the challenge to remove the color is not that big as the añejo, no?
Yeah, without removing all the flavor.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Because what the activated carbon makes to the spirits is to remove color and also flavors, but also open original flavor like the agave. So we're gonna try this Crystalino, and I bet you're gonna find more agave than in the reposado. Why? Because we remove the aging. That is a distraction sometimes.
Mhm.
Well, you do, but and it's interesting because it's not just the color. You're right. There has to be something chemical going on in terms of what fats and things you're absorbing, or if there are any fats, which we should know, but what you're absorbing, lignin and things like that from the wood, right? That carry the wood flavors go away.
That is correct.
Now,
yes.
because this is, for me, I happen to I prefer Blanco.
Mhm.
If I were any one of the styles, just because I think that is really, to me, that's the spirit of what you're producing. That's the best expression, because there's nothing influencing, nothing influencing except the farmer and the skill of the person on the still, and that's it when you get a Blanco. But you're right, this is amazing for something that's been filtered, that bright agave spice really starts to come back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like to make the distinction when I'm talking to consumers that this is not an extra distillation, it's a filtration. So, that extra distillation would strip it much more than this filtration's doing. So that's something I like to note.
And it's interesting because the first ones that came through, I mean, probably the first big commercial would have either been Diamante or Claro Añejo, right? And I think in both of those cases they were, and then Berta Gonzalez, the Casa Dragones was an early one too, I think. At least commercially. The Maestro Maestro de Bell was probably the first.
I think they were
that process, were they distilling? That I thought was a filtration process.
Are you talking about Casa Dragones?
No, the Maestro de Bell.
Oh, Master de Bell. I believe that is a Crystalino. I think that was the first one, and I think they added a different, reposado and an añejo, and it was a combination of some tequilas.
It's a blend of different aging products, reposado, añejo, and extra añejo. That's what they say.
That's label. Yeah, because that was, I mean, the interesting thing there was it was actually J.P. Beckman, right, who was quietly on the side with the blessing, but not carrying the name of the Cuervo. The Cuervo products, something that he did on his own.
So can you kind of break down what's going on here technically when you're filtering this color out for some of the listeners here?
Sure.
I mean, it's just charcoal that it gets slowly dripped through.
So the process is to use this liquid and convert into this liquid. How? It's pretty simple, actually. It's passed this liquid through a filter, a press filter that has paper, different paper and plastic filter between each layer. And then you pass the filter and you have the activated carbon impregnate inside the filters.
Okay.
That is one technique. Another technique is to put the activated carbon directly to the liquid and then filter in the same filter to keep to separate the activated carbon and only keep the spirit. And what we did in Partida was to say, okay, we noticed that using activated carbon, we have a collateral problem, which is make the tequila very astringent. And that's the reason most of the Crystalinos is additives to put agave nectar or high fructose or sweeter, artificial sweeter and flavoring, because it's a problem. It's a problem. So what the challenge to us was, okay, we need to select the less aggressive activated carbon, natural, vegetal, and as well, the less time in contact with the liquid, just to abstract the color while keeping the flavor and the aromas. And that was a lot of rounds and a lot of experiment at the lab stage and then at the volume stage.
Yeah, that must have been a ton of time to figure out how to do that.
Yes. Actually, to do the Roble Fino took us 1 year, but I would say 80% of the time it was more about this.
That's interesting. You mentioned that with I've always kind of gotten that more fake sugar kind of character out of a lot of Crystalinos that I've had. But I never really put two and two together, and that filtration process was really the reason they had to go back on the back end and kind of make up for that.
Yes, it's
well, because you're stripping fat, and fat is a lot of, you're stripping fatty acids,
Mouthfeel.
which is why you're talking about
Mouthfeel.
astringent.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
you're stripping fatty acid, you're stripping acid, which is why it's getting so astringent.
Mhm.
So the bitterness, and for people that are watching that don't, if something is astringent, you don't know what astringent flavor is, but it's the dryness and bitterness in the middle and the back of your mouth is basically astringency.
Yes, the fatty acid, one of the purpose of the fatty acid is to delay the time of absorption in your mouth. No, if you remove that fatty acids from the liquid, so it's going to be faster the absorption. So either you find very alcoholic or very astringent.
Which is the reason that, Jose and I both agreed before, he produced Crystalino Roble Fino, that we didn't really care for the other Crystalinos we were trying in the marketplace. We're like, oh,
right.
So I think that's part of the reason, is because, perhaps they're filtering it too much. They're taking away too much. And then they have to put something back in to make it taste like what they want it to. Yeah.
And then it ends up tasting like, a colorless Diet Coke or something.
Yes.
Well, and I think exactly, because I think part of the problem is, at least early on, I think that what was done with it was true experimentation early on. Again, what would have been done with something like Maestro de Bell, and then the Claro Añejo, and then Casa Dragones, and some of the things I think they were playing with there. And then it probably went off the rails when people realized that there's some commercial viability, and then it became, we have to have one. Right. And that's, we have to have one. So what do we do? I don't know. Take the color out. Ooh, this doesn't taste good. Well, sweeten it up. Right.
Exactly.
And now you've got something to put in the bottle.
Exactly.
But also is to offer something different as well. I think there's market for everyone, and people who like strong, let's say, whiskey drinkers that like the aging, double aging, cask strength, and also the old school tequila, which like the Blanco, right? But there, I would say there is another three type of consumers of tequila that they want. Okay, I don't want too much agave, and I don't want too much wood. No, I just want the good things about the tequila, which is an upper that it's good to me, it's good to my body, it's no additive, so it's better than trying artificial things, right?
Yeah, I feel like the Crystalino, even though it's not an official category yet, I feel like it's going to bring more people into tequila, because if they're not, it's going to be a discovery for them. And if they start here, I think it's a really easy, beautiful entryway into the world of tequilas, right?
Yeah, it's at least some form of introduction to the flavor of a brown aged tequila.
Exactly.
What's the bottling proof on the Crystalino?
It's 40%. Again,
40%.
The use of activated carbon, actually, most of the Cristalinos in Mexico, which is very, we have been with Cristalino since 2010. I think it was Don Julio 70 and Maestro de Bell, Maestro Tequilero. They were the first one, and it was 2010. They put it in 35% alcohol, which is 70 proof, no? Which is allowed in Mexico, not in the US. Why? Again, because of the consequence of using activated carbon. So to reduce the alcohol impact in your absorption.
Interesting.
And Jose has told me that he uses a minimal amount of activated charcoal. So, as not to remove it so much.
Actually,
well, you said it's embedded in the filter. It's rather than like, so it's, people think of activated charcoal in America, they think of Jack Daniels, which is a 10-foot vat of maple charcoal that distillate goes through, and then in the case of Gentleman Jack, a smaller vat that finished product goes through. You're talking about just basically paper pads with a bit of charcoal embedded.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you need many filtration, because in the first filtration you remove maybe 30% of the color, but you need to remove, and we remove not all the color. If you see the bottle, it's around 3 to 4% color.
Okay.
Right.
Nice, love it.
That's similar to some white rums.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So like maybe using more very old or third use fill barrels might be of benefit.
Actually, Joe, the idea, quite honest, the idea of Roble Fino Crystalino came with the, again, Edrington relationship with Brugal. The Ortega
okay.
family, the Maestros Roneros of this brand, we have this conversation about what they do in their Brugal extra dry, which is aging and then pass through activated carbon and remove the color.
Right, which I think a lot of people, a lot of people don't realize that. Look at Puerto Rican rum; it's required to be 2 years old, right?
Yep.
Puerto Rican rum is required to be aged for 2 years, and so if you have any sort of clear Puerto Rican rum, silver, that's been aged and filtered. So,
Wow.
the rum industry will definitely know that.
Wow, these were great, guys. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Pleasure
And I
to
just
talk about
wanted-
these.
Absolutely. We love being with you guys here today. And you know, we really appreciate your partnership at Binny's. It means so much to us. And we really appreciate your consumers supporting Partida. And I just want to let people know it's such a simple thing to elevate your tequila neat this way, as an alternative to a cocktail, for instance, because you don't necessarily want to put Roble Fino in a cocktail, but you could have fun with it and serve, for instance, the Crystalino with some grapefruit slices on a tray in a beautiful glass like this. And perhaps—
And that is, and Sofia, who made that glass?
Well, we have our little spirit bird, but this is a Riedel glass.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and they
did. We have to thank
Pat.
Well, we were given Alex from Edrington gave us the glasses today
that's
for the Whiskey Hotline team. Much appreciated. I don't know if Joe's Pat is doing this one from a remote location, so he was not in the office, but yes, they are. For those that I believe we're going to try to get we're going to try to use this in the future, some of these glasses for consumers who are going to try and are willing to try and give Roble Fino a shot. Absolutely. For other reason than just the fact that it's fantastic tequila, but yes.
Yeah. I like the idea of serving it with a grapefruit slice though too. I think it's
and
it's a complementary flavor for sure.
It really is beautiful. You're pairing, it's not necessarily a cocktail, but it's something fun to do if you have some special guests. I love doing the añejo Roble Fino with some orange slices with sprinkled cinnamon on top of it. It's a lovely way to enjoy it. And getting some fun flavors, the tequila shares with the citrus. So I like, having people over and doing that. And they're like, well, I've never tried this before. I'm like, well, that's right.
I would try some of the simpler rum cocktails with some of these, something where you're just adding a bit of lime juice and maybe a little bit of agave nectar or cane syrup or something. Absolutely. And I think just having that fresh, just a clean citrus bite that gives that acidity, gives a little lift, but it doesn't, totally overpower the spirit. I think these would be great spirits for cocktails.
Absolutely. Spirit forward cocktails, especially.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well,
100%.
Guys, thanks again. I really appreciate it. Everybody else, thanks for joining us today on a little Tequila Friday, I guess we'll call it, on a virtual tasting with Binny's.
Wonderful.
So Sofia, pleasure. Jose, thank you very much. And thank you guys for being open and honest about everything you're doing with these tequilas. As I mentioned earlier, we're big supporters of tequilas that aren't throwing a bunch of aspartame in right before they're bottled. So we do appreciate these quite a bit. So cheers, guys. Cheers to you.
Cheers everyone
else. Thank you.
Indeed.
Thank you, guys.
Stay safe out there. Have a good weekend. And
have
happy
a great
birthday,
weekend.
Sofia.
Thank you so much.
Everybody wish Sophia happy birthday.
Oh, thanks, you guys.
Thanks for joining us, everybody else. We'll see you next week. Cheers.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Salud.